Shemichael Hallman serves as the Senior Library Manager for the Memphis Public Libraries. His work includes overseeing, or this work includes overseeing the multi-million-dollar renovation of the historic Cossett Library in downtown Memphis. His 2020 TEDx talk, given in February, focuses on how this project is working to create a space where everyone belongs, and that generates opportunities for shared experiences among people of all incomes and backgrounds. Shemichael is currently a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania, studying nonprofit leadership. As part of his studies, he is working to launch the Zoé Center, a social venture aimed at decreasing the number of disconnected youth in Memphis. Shemichael serves on a number of nonprofit boards in Memphis, is the campus pastor of a multi-site church, and was recently named with a 40 under 40 honoree by the Memphis Business Journal. And today he's going to be talking about the Ministry of Reconnection, how we work to end the marginalization and disconnection of Black and Brown young adults in the U.S. So that being said, I think I'm going to stop share and let Shemichael take it away.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and thank you all for being a part of this. I have been a part of the Passion Talks family for I think about 5 years now, and it's just been really great to see the growth and just the dynamic range of speakers that we've had this year. So excited to be with you all. I've spent the majority of my life working with youth in some form. At the age of 8 years old, I could often be found in the basement, sometimes hesitantly, in the basement of my church on Sunday morning, co-teaching Sunday school classes. In my teen years, those duties became leading those Sunday school classes on my own, and occasionally traveling to other churches to teach other youth. My first official youth pastor role came at the age of 25. And in the 15 years that have followed that, I've worked with youth in some form or fashion, from full-time ministry to part-time mentoring, and kind of every place in between. I've engaged in this work for so long just because of really an undeniable calling and a desire to help those who look like me or who have looked like me. The young, the gifted, the Black, the often misunderstood, the ones who are generally seeking something better. And so God was, and God is, a natural answer. As the psalmist declares, his word is a lamp unto our feet and a light into our path. And that was the message that I carried almost my entire life. It was a message of reconciliation. But if you ever worked in any community with people who are marginalized or underserved or vulnerable in any way, at some point you recognize that in addition to a message of reconciliation, there must also be a message of liberation. A message that, in the words of Desmond Tutu, and I quote, seeks to lay bare for all to see that the divine activity is in fact ultimately a peace, that God sets his people free to enter the promised land in this life and not merely in some vague celestial future. It is a message that claims that God is forever active in the upsetting of the status quo, that humanity's future is not determined, that in fact it is open to divine surprise, and seeks to subvert dehumanizing structure which makes God's children less than what he intends them to be. For me, that message is now wrapped up in a social impact venture and nonprofit that I hope in some way might bring about liberation. Nearly 5 million young people in this country are labeled as disconnected youth. They are young adults between the ages of 16 and 24 who are neither working nor in school. As we all might imagine, these are critical years for a young person's life. These are the years that provide an opportunity for developing agency and confidence. These are the years where young people learn about themselves and others. Very, very crucial and pivotal moment. And when they are not connected, it has a lasting impact, not only on their individual lives, but as a society as a whole. And what we see and what we are seeing is that a significant number of these disconnected youth are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The issue hits home for me in particular because where I live in Memphis, Tennessee, we have one of the highest rates of youth disconnection in the country. Over 20%, over one in five young people in this city are disconnected. And what that means more often than not is that those are Black and brown children. And as we think about kind of why this issue exists, right? What has gotten us to this place? What we see is that there is a complex combination of factors such as race and place. High rates of poverty, high rates of adult unemployment, and a high degree of racial segregation all lead to high rates of disconnection among adults. Parents who struggle with weak attachment to the labor market themselves are less able to be able to help their children get a foothold in the world. So how do we go about changing this? How do we go about addressing this issue? A 2019 study by the Measure of America listed 4 tactics that, working together, we can begin to implement to right this wrong in our society. Tactic number 1 is that we must begin to confront the historical and intergenerational disadvantage, especially racism, that we see in our country. We must recognize that disconnection is not just an individual issue, but a systemic issue as well. And we must work to dismantle systems of oppression, discrimination, and inequities in a way that helps our youth. Tactic number 2 involves supporting vulnerable youth. That means we must understand that there are certain circumstances that put young people at a higher risk of disconnection than their peers. We must work to create the types of programs and initiatives that support students with disabilities, those who have caretaking responsibilities, just to name a few. Tactic number 3 involves keeping youth connected, right? And this is, we understand that there are key junctures in a young person's life. There are key grades where young people are more often than not fall into disconnection, right? And this could be, for instance, say the literacy proficiency for second graders. And then tactic number 4 is that we must re-engage disconnected youth. While prevention is the best cure, we have to recognize that there are a number of young people in our communities that need to be brought back in. And so while there are certainly no shortage of social impact ventures and nonprofits, definitely in my city, but probably across the country, my history in working with this specific group of young adults has led me to launch the Zoé Center. And it is essentially a hyper-local solution rooted in a predominantly Black community in Southeast Memphis. It is both a physical space as well as a suite of empowerment and advocacy programs. The center, which I hope to launch later this year, will provide a holistic development to young people that not only provides occupational and educational support, but also touches on the physical, emotional, spiritual, and community well-being. The center will seek to accomplish this really in 2 key ways. The first way is supporting vulnerable youth. And the second way is reconnecting the disengaged youth. So how do we support vulnerable youth? One of the core issues when it comes to keeping youth connected are the disproportionately high rates of discipline laid upon Black and brown students. One of the most egregious examples that I was able to pull locally showed an instance where Black students made up 16% of the overall student population, but accounted for nearly 50% of all the suspensions. In my personal experience working with middle school students in Memphis, I have found that the majority of those cases involve Black boys. These high rates can be attributed to a lot of things, but in part, negative stereotypes that continue to exist about Black and brown students. A 2018 Harvard Public Health report showed that the stereotypes that particularly white adults have towards Black and brown children in a way that conceives them more than like 1.5 to 2 times more likely to be violence prone and unintelligent than their white peers. And while African American males are most likely to be disciplined in school, African American females are also disproportionately suspended and expelled. In fact, an analysis of 2006 and 2007 data showed that African American girls in urban middle schools had the fastest growing rates of suspension of any group of girls or boys. It's something that we must work on. It's something that's not acceptable. And one of the first initiatives that I will take on as a part of the Zoé Center is an advocacy campaign around this issue. There are current relationships that I have and that I'm working to develop with schools and educators to identify where are these very high incident rates of these Black and brown students who are being disciplined. And then what might we do? How might we take action steps to bring these rates down. And I believe there are a number of things that we can do, both in policies, right, as we're thinking about implicit bias training for staff and other type of professional development, but also programs such as restorative justice circles, which I've helped to organize. In her groundbreaking book, Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools, Monique Morris states that teachers can be healers. And so often other influential adults shape the trajectory of young Black people. When Black girl energy is uncontainable, she says, we can jump on and dance with them. When the world is painful, we can scream with them and not at them. If the world weighs heavy on them, we can teach them how to write and sit and write with them. We can have longer conversations and longer tempers. We can let them lead and question and thrive. And so what I intend to do with the Zoé Center is to advocate for this, to advocate for the creation of classroom environments that reflect diversity, equity, and justice, to advocate for the development of instructional strategies that support diverse learning styles, and to advocate for the deployment of systems of evaluation that promote success for all students rather than fostering a state of competition. The second target area is really around reconnecting disengaged youth. And this is why I call this the ministry of reconnection. It is an ongoing process. It did not happen overnight, cannot be resolved overnight. The greatest asset that we have right now, the Zoé Center has, is a physical space, about 6,000 square feet, that consists of a medium-sized auditorium and multiple classrooms. It's part of a community church right now, my church, that's well respected in the community and draws a lot of young adults. I'm going to use this physical space to create diverse pathways to meaningful careers through apprenticeships and mentoring programs that will give young adults the tools they need to get reconnected to our society. Understanding that the need isn't just for work and school, though, the center will also help connect young adults to the community through civic engagement endeavors and through using tools like the wellness wheel to ensure that we're meeting all of their kind of holistic needs. Listen, the current moment that we find ourselves in not only asking us to proclaim that Black Lives Matter, but to also work to dismantle the oppressive systems and structures that make the phrase necessary in the first place. In Micah 6:8, the children of Israel are reminded that God had asked and was asking them to do three things: to act justly, to love mercifully, and to walk humbly with their God. The Zoe Project is my attempt at this. It is my desire to hold up my little corner of the world. And I would encourage you to do the same. This is an area where you feel like you might want to make an impact. I would suggest and encourage you to look at the data. I'm not making up any of this. This is hard data. Sites such as the Civil Rights Data Collection will help you see if there are disparities in your community. And together, working together, we can bring these numbers down. Working together, we can reconnect these vulnerable youth. Working together, we can lay a path to success for these young adults. Thank you so much.
So the previous chair also clapped after everyone shared. So I thought I'd add in some applause. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so let me check if we have any questions on the forum. I was hoping that, I just have to say, I really enjoyed your talk, and in particular, the idea of teachers being able to be healers, as opposed to, some of the issues that might happen associated with implicit bias. So I guess maybe a follow-up question in that direction would be, in addition to, I assume implicit bias requiring that for teachers is one starting point. Are there other steps that would be involved or that could be taken in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's important that when we call out implicit bias, I think sometimes it can be done in a way that causes us to be defensive, right? But that's essentially just the way that we were raised, right? It's the way, the education system that we were a part of. And so I think taking the defensiveness out of that is important, first off. But then I think about all of the ways, we talked about these restorative justice circles, right? And the alternate ways in which we seek to discipline or help students see their wrong, right? And so in a number of cases, we see young adults, 16, 17 years old, immediately get in-school suspension or get expelled, right? When these justice circles really bring these students in a circle with the people that they've offended, that they've hurt, and help them see how the hurt happened, but also how they may go about resolving that, right? And so it leads to a much more holistic way of doing that. Additionally, I have seen, even with the students themselves, come from sometimes very traumatic environments. You know, they have seen issues of domestic violence. They've seen friends and loved ones get killed by gun violence or drug abuse, right? And there's a tremendous amount of trauma there, right? And sometimes they don't always know how to express that, how to express the anger and the frustration that's there. And so sometimes it's giving them the tools to be able to understand what they are feeling and to be able to express how they're feeling in ways that are productive and healthy and whole is a really great way.
Great, thank you. So I see a couple questions coming up from, there's one from Tim who's going to be speaking later. Tim, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. I really appreciate everything that you're doing, Shamichael. And I had a question about the mentorship. How do you find mentors to become part of your program? And the second question would be, what do you think are the characteristics that make a good mentor?
So because much of this is rooted in the church, we're able to find mentors there first, but there are a number of organizations and corporations throughout the city, who I think are going to be open to this. I think it's important, particularly as we talk about Black boys and girls, I think it's important for two things for them to see. Number one, it's important for them to see people that look like them, particularly Black boys, right? When you think about many of our educational systems, Black men are some of the rarest educators you will find, right? Even in urban cores, you're often hard pressed to find a large number of Black males, teachers. And so exposing young Black men to other Black men, who is very important. Then I think also on top of that then is to provide them with and to have mentors who have a diverse range of experiences, right? Sometimes you can only be what you see. You can only be what you know, right? And so exposing young people to, diverse backgrounds, diverse occupations, right? The rainbow spectrum is wide. And so for me, it's always been very, very important to do, I've done a Black men career day. We're just going to bring in Black men who are all range, plumbers, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, right? And I think that's very, very important. But in terms of the quality, though, you talked, Tim, about the quality of mentors. I think one of the most important things is to be a great listener, right? Because sometimes mentors come in and they want to have this whole life experience and they've seen all of these things and they just sometimes kind of want to empty all those experiences out into a young person. But often what I've seen is that young people often need someone to listen to, right? To fully hear them, to be active listeners, right? And in that active listening, you discover a wealth of things that help you be a better mentor.
Thanks, Michael. I'm seeing two questions from John, and I'm assuming this is from Facebook or YouTube Live. And I think we can wrap them into one in the interest of time. But so the first question is, someone says, I love his vision for the Zoé Center. Does Shamichael want this center to be a model for other centers that can be planted for restorative justice across the country? And then I think just tying into that, how can we, the audience, support you in the work you're doing practically?
If it becomes a model, I certainly would love that. I mean, that would be great. There are a number of other organizations, even in Memphis, that are doing this work. My focus is to go hyper-local. I say I'm just doing this in a very particular community that I think needs it, right? And so if there is something to be modeled, that I would love for that to be modeled. That sometimes, we create ventures and we're just trying to scale very quickly and we miss the people who are in the communities, right? But I really want to focus this in. If it doesn't scale beyond this community, if it just serves this community, then I'm great with that, right? And then I would say in terms of support, I appreciate that. I'm not at a place right now where I can take financial support. But I will say this is not just an issue in Memphis. This is an issue across the country, right? And so if this is something that you think, you have a heart for or a passion for, find, the organizations in your city, who are doing the work, and support them. I think that's a wonderful thing that you can do.
Great. Thank you, Shamichael. I actually highlighted when you said hyperlocal in your talk. I really liked that emphasis. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely appreciate your answer on that.
Thank you so much.